brand new concept. Although I technically released this on my Twitter, Xenon Reality, already, but no one follows me on YouTube or Twitter really practically at all. So like, have fun with that. But okay, so this is a gear ratio and slip camshaft add-on upgrade to get rid of a throttle body concept. Okay, now this is a little bit weird for some people out there that might not know, but if you use a cone, you can change gear ratios, because larger to smaller. Okay, you know about that, most likely. If you don't, then now you do. And that'll probably help you out with being able to understand this concept a little bit moving forward a little better. Alright. Now, this is a $250 design that I was hoping to find somebody to eventually invest in and be able to sell, because it wouldn't take much to add this on to your already existing camshaft gears. Alright, so the basic premise is, as the gear, as the as the RPMs go up, the camshaft will change based upon where those RPMs are and where they're staying at. At a low RPM, we want terrible timing, so that way it happens to at a quarter to a halfway to bottom dead center, open, and then it gives it air and gas, and then it's closed at bottom dead center. That way it doesn't really produce a lot of horsepower and remains at a low idle. So that way you don't have a need for a throttle body. And then on top of that, it slips when it's going fast enough during its moment of time when the valve is pushing down to open the air intake or exhaust, therefore giving it longer duration, but not lift. We're not looking for lift here. We're looking at a variable of duration and timing. Timing for duration and timing for lift is not necessary, really, and except for if you want to add more lift, then you can always weld some pieces on there and smooth it down with some sanding and probably get what you're looking for. And then it's all about timing to make sure that it doesn't smack the top of your piston head. Now, the way it slips is a rather easy solution. As it gets to a certain point when it's traveling fast enough, it breaks free of its grip, which is a friction component. No, that's just a light shining up my mustache. I shaved today. Didn't work out. Anyways, as a result of that friction breaking free, because inertia has gotten to that point, because we're talking about a mass at the top that then swings down, and then as it swings down, it spins up and it slips, and so therefore isn't connected, and then connects, and it hits much like an impact driver on a drill bit or a drill or whatever automatic drill thing happens to be. And that's all that really ultimately is, except we're forcing it every single time to occur during the opening point for the valves. Now, it seems great in theory, except people may not understand why it's able to be done more than just one time. See, it's more than just for one single cylinder. It's totally able to be done for multiple, in fact, up to 8, technically, different times in a given circle. It's not like you can't do that many times for the entire duration of the gear turn, which gives you your variation of duration. And in fact, an entire duration at the RPM that you're looking for by changing your gear ratio during that moment in time. Because, of course, you have your cone. And your gear ratio is set up for a slower to faster, timing. So that's timing. So it'll happen a little bit sooner, a little bit later. And at different RPMs, you want different types of duration to allow for not increased amounts of fuel use, which gets around this dumb idea of needing a port injection or direct injection. In fact, you don't need a throttle body at all anymore, technically speaking. But I wouldn't do that just because it still will go forward. Air still goes forward, so it still bunches up, creates a spring, and goes forward. While you're at high RPM, it'll be fine. It'll suck in enough air often enough. Low RPM should be okay, but when you go from high to low RPM, it will belt out fuel, which isn't usually what you're looking for. So, carburetors still not really that great to me, but you can use them. Should you have an intake manifold that will allow for that springed air to work back into itself, much like I use these curves like slots like this, and then they'll have like that and like that, basically like your fingers. So you have a flat piece, as air goes through most of the time, and then like it still produces like this curvature effect as it spins down, and you have like basically just a flat wall. And so like that will suck in towards it, but then as it comes up, it tries to angle off of that with this, and then you can use an intake manifold with some slight curves to basically force air to travel more towards the rear for your 2, 3, 4 respectively pistons. But you can also do the same thing here on the rear side, and then for number 1 and number 2 and number 3 and number 4, you have them angling towards each other, and then you have an air intake at the rear and an air intake in the front, which creates a massive plenum volume that likes to circulate air up, back down into where your piston intake port area is, alongside of creating an oscillatory increased pressure event fairly regularly for most of your pistons. Hey, focus, camera. Hey, look at me. It's not focusing. Have to lean in. You gonna do that? Yeah. No. Anyways, point is, I still use port injection. I still use direct injection, and in fact, I have a different way of managing spring rate. Spring rate to me is bullshit, and I hate it. I hate spring rate. Everything about spring rate can fuck right off as far as I'm concerned. I hate springs all the time for all the reasons why anybody should hate springs for valves. Valves hate, like, why would I need this? I'm already spinning something that pushes you down. So I attach a string with a spring on it. Still couldn't get rid of it. But it has a couple holes through it. And it has a spring. It allows for what is a lever action. As it goes up, it pulls it up. And then it has a spring to increase the retention, and then it goes back down. And so that, helps out that whole process. I don't like springs, though. And so I've been using air pneumatics, and then I got really pissed off at air pneumatics. My head looks at them, and the failure rates of these things are annoying. I have failure rates. They still work as long as anything else, but they're failing to me in a way that just annoys me. So I don't like them. And they're pretty tough springs still, but I just don't like them. I don't like springs. Springs to me annoy me. But the point is like that's a way to get around having a need for this high tension spring rate and being able to go at a higher RPM with less outright care about going to higher RPM, because it will still have the lift and duration and still have the spring rate, quotation marks, because it's pulling it up versus trying to have it push up with a spring. So it will always achieve its desired result. It's a workaround to the spring problem that annoys me. Then I have a hinge system and a bunch of holes in my valves. That's right. So as the valve pushes down, it will create a bunch of relief holes. And so, like, if you don't know, a valve is a circle with a bunch of just garbage in front of it, stopping my airflow. Much like the slats of our fingers, you can produce slats in these things, but holes more than anything. And then you have rigid structures where that is, with hinges that are going to not open. No, I'm not looking to open. No, actually, as it pushes down, it's looking to create an opposite effect. So the hinge will go up, but it's like, I don't like that. And so then I've been trying to do hinges to the side that all kind of, which opens more area, meaning more nozzle, surface circular area that goes into our, cylinder. Faster velocities, higher airflow, which is a good thing. That's what you're looking for those high RPMs. So you need that to be able to achieve a greater degree of horsepower and torque. So same thing with the exhaust. The exhaust is always at a quarter to an eighth at bottom dead center that I open that, because that's still pretty much at that point not really producing. In fact, at like halfway down, it's basically stopped being able to produce us power, because as the piston starts slowing down, and it really just gets used to try and help compression at that point for the next set. But when you have momentum as a high RPM is achieved, it's less and less necessary. Anyways, but at quarter to an eighth, I almost always just open it. But then that one, I just sort of have a... So I love this one. This one trips people's brains out. So let me get like a sheet of paper. But you should already have an idea of where I'm going with it, because I said the word hinge. So, as a valve goes down... Yeah, that's terrible drawing. Okay. I'm not very good at... That's a penis at this point. Alright. Just try and draw this correctly. Imagine, if you will, cross-sectional area where these parts are hollow. It's like a Pokeball now. There it is, But I get it. I know. It's so... anyways, but the point is like, that's where, as it pushes down, instead of pushing down together with it, it is instead going to have an opposite effect, which pushes that up, which then basically removes the majority of the valves that are there. And so that valve then opens up, and it's got little that come in and press it down for the exhaust side, and same thing with our intake side. And so as they open up, they give us that patented extra area for our nozzle surface area to increase flow rates during the press in. And then they have a nice little clip, and then as it pushes down, it releases a clip, and it comes in, and we got our little push-up spring for the camshaft, and it works rather well as a design to remove the flaws I have with valves. In fact, most of my designs are just hydraulic rams that slide on a two-piece construction with a friction bearing that is usually attached to our crankshaft. Those are like the same kind of bearings that I use, and then I'll stick a solid piece into it that has it's a good way to put this. So it's a double hat system is usually how I call this. I'm going to draw this. And so typically it's a 3D printed design. So if you can look right here, it's a double hat. So it's a hat and a hat with brims, double brims basically. And so what that means is, but they're not square. They're I should let you know, those are bulbous, mushroom tipped in their design, because what that means is it creates a curvature that hooks in, which I think you can imagine that. I didn't need to draw that. That allows for a greater degree of reduced escape for the gas that's in there, the high pressure gas, which that area is filled with the hydraulic fluid, and allows for me to ram it back and forward with a small pneumatic cylinder at the top that acts like a little bit of a spring, which they're meant to be able to angle, so that one will go up, that one will go down, so that way the two-piece, you'll have both of them be able to open up. Although timing-wise, it should never happen, but you'll have full lift duration, lift as in full opening, basically. It's more just one single sliding design. Then I was like, people will probably want the slot thing, for whatever damn reason, I don't know. So then I made it a two-piece that has holes, and then that opens kind of like that, but it's more like the opposite way. So that's open, and then but this is covering it, and then this will open faster than that. And so you get a little bit more air, and it's meant to vortex it together with two of them that swirls, and it creates a more of a vacuum hole in the center that will try and force more air in, but then it's getting curved with these edges here that create vortex generation, which spin it down. But if you do it this way, then you can still get that, and then you can still create that vacuuming kind of effect. It's a vacuum. It's a lower pressure zone that will force more air in, which is the reason why I was doing it alongside of port injection. This is all in my head. I'm very creative, imaginative person that can do stuff like that, unlike most other people. That's something I can do. I don't need a high-end computer to do it. But as it goes in, it creates that same effect. Using the same valve technology for the standard push rod, it will do the same thing. I will use the sliding valve every single time just because of its simplicity of design. It's cooling the top, and not to mention it's faster and more reliable over time. Those hinges aren't really ever going to break, if I'm being honest. They're just, that's the worst part about those. I just don't like hinges, but then I try to just make rods that are there, but then that's taking up the space and volume, and so then that was annoying after a certain point. And so I was like, and then how do I fucking force more airflow? Because this thing's in the way. This solid metal piece is in the way all the time. It sucks. They're garbage. I hate them. I want my sliding valves now. But I eventually relented, and people wanted push rod valves that have holes in them. I also started making curved pieces that go together onto the stem of the valve, and then cut in slots and angles, and then started making it a teardrop shape, so that way as it comes in from one side, it has an easier time to travel in. and spread itself out, thus increasing flow, which did help quite a bit, but just cutting areas that are in the way, it was better to do that. And so like those helped out a lot. But as the hinge, it's like a lot of people I don't think maybe understand the hinge part. And so, because they're like, it'll never work, why not just go in and then up? And then I'm like, because that's in the way. That's in the way of the air. Smacking the air. That thing, you know what I mean? So it's in the way. But it's a really neat little trick, because it's like, oh, I can, if you don't know, we have things that can curve and bend that are very, very good at what they do. And so when we do that, we create a way for it to slip under the original valve. And so like it'll slip under that valve, which of course, if you don't know, that seated pressure is what causes that seal. When it forces it against it, it's like it creates a seal that then makes it so it's less likely to blow past. It still does a little, but not as much, which is a big deal. So that's the basic premise. It's like, if I can do it in the right way, as this opens, it's pushing it, that opens that up, and then it's able to come back, because it's getting pushed. So it's like it gets pushed down, slips up, and it goes up, and so that way, like, it actually works. Yeah, a lot better typically, although that's remains to be seen kind of thing. But if you do the right hook into like a groove like that, as it gets pushed down, it opens. And so like air has to go up and then over and then down, and then it has to try and go up again. Doesn't want to do that. Typically, it usually just wants to go down on the thing that's already going down, so it'll still give you a lot more power. You're not going to lose that much. In fact, you'll lose nothing compared to the amount of gain of the outright air that you're getting in, and therefore more fuel, because we have more duration, and lift at that point is kind of irrelevant, because I made the nozzle bigger. Instead of having it be like this, and then I really only gave you this small little area that's around this part, that part. Instead, I decided to do boom, go through, which gives you more air usually, so that's typically all that does. And then it slips, and then it changes its duration, and as a result, alongside of its timing, as a result of slightly moving forward and backwards during the RPM, and then so like that way it actually stays for the full duration. And then I have a nice little trick at that bottom dead center, because it's going to start pushing itself out, and then it should equalize to be pretty much near atmosphere, and then goes up at the at top dead center, which is a good thing. Head gaskets are not liking what I did, because like the idea was to then, like, I have port injection, and then I have like a diesel injection, and I go with extra air, instead of like, I have about this much air. Well, now I have way more air, so I'm using the spin and then the little manifold area, and then no throttle body here, so it's just a plenum volume sucking in along with that rear and that front. So the front comes in, and it's going to do its job, but the rear is still coming in, because and so like it creates this never-ending mishmash of increased PSI in the intake manifold with a pressure movement, back and forth for the given 4 to 8 cylinders, because it's 4 attached to 4, so it's still the same thing. You just basically replicate it on both sides, and then you go underneath to get the one, so that way it goes up and then pushes back in, creating another plenum advantage. a very large plenum advantage. But because it's only injecting when the valves are open, I don't have to worry about gas being soaked around in the, intake manifold. So that's a plus, So that's my Xenon Realities concept here. It's a very neat little concept. I was hoping to sell it for about $250. And the basic designs for, like, if you want to weld. But if you don't want to weld, you can always 3D print it and then add on cardboard and some aluminum foil, and with some little spray adhesive, and it should work out. It's all about how much pressure it can really handle. And so, like, that's JB Weld right there, and some duct tape. That's what that is. Is what that is to me. Other people, it would never hold. Meanwhile, it's still holding. Granted, it's not going to handle your forced induction, whatever. I don't have that. You know what I mean? I don't have that. So, and then there's a nice little trick that I, on the nose, keep it on the down low. If you take out or you add to your AC, okay, and you stick it in right before or right after your air intake, thingy-majig that is filtering it for your air filter, and you stick like a little tiny, and we're not talking about many fin areas here. We're talking about just a little bit of fin areas. That way it cools down air as is coming in. Even forced induction, if it's after your air-to-air exchanger, and you're able to basically create that box, and as it goes over and then through, down, and then it goes and gets sucked into your intake manifold, you'll create a colder, denser air that you can run more fuel to. Adding to that a air temperature sensor, a air pressure sensor at your port areas, alongside of a CFM airflow sensor, which is not mass airflow. Okay, I know a lot of people think mass airflow works. Mass airflows are garbage. These three sensors are the king of sensors. You want those air sensors. That allows for you to better time your air-fuel ratios, because if you calculate the density of air based upon its pressure and temperature and airflow, then you are able to understand the amount of actual air inside your cylinder, and you should push these amounts of fuels to that cylinder. Okay, so it gives you a little bit more from that, and you don't need a throttle body, and you can shove off the extra, air pressure that might happen into your exhaust before the turbine. And in fact, you're going to have that open so that way it doesn't bleed it out into the atmosphere, it bleeds it out into your turbine. It's going to keep it up like an anti-lag for a little bit, and it has an escape route. But it has a valve, not a pressure valve. Instead, it's just an active valve. I use an active valve in my concept designs. Other people can just use a pressure valve. I don't really like pressure valves. They'll always be open, and I don't like that. So active valves are kind of my jam. But that's it seems like it's describing a down tube, but you need to actively have it open during when one of the exhausts is not exhausting. That way you don't have it push back into your intake, because otherwise you'll have it push back into your intake. So you need to have it when the exhaust is not exhausting, because that's a lot of hot air that's very highly pressurized, and if it's not there, then you can push in that air because there's a low enough pressure to push in that extra air into that volume. And so it acts a little bit like a continuation of an anti-lag, but it's not, but it kind of is slightly. It's more like it'll slowly still woo, it's not going to keep it going. It's just going to go woo, and it'll eventually turn off. That's what it does. That's all it's meant to do. All right. See ya. Bye. Thank you for listening if you did. I hope you have a wonderful day.